One of the big questions that I think many of the MPs on that committee have been really building up to is the question of whether David Cameron, as Foreign Secretary, has seen or received advice from UK government lawyers suggesting that Israel has been in breach of international humanitarian law. There were many questions about this. He initially refused to get into it. He said he couldn't answer. He couldn't remember every single piece of paper that came across his desk, that the way it works is that lawyers look at specific incidents and they go off and they ask the right questions, and he can't therefore give a blanket answer. But eventually he did acknowledge that it was something he was concerned about. Let's have a quick lesson.
If you're asking me, am I worried that Israel has taken action that might be in breach of international law because this particular premises has been bombed or whatever? Yes, of course I'm worried about that, and that's why I consult the Foreign Office lawyers when giving this advice on arms exports. So that's why I don't. So if you put it that way, I'm happy to say yes, of course. Every day I look at what's happened and ask questions about, is this in line with international humanitarian law? Could the Israelis have done better to avoid civilian casualties? Of course I do that.
Now, it's interesting, David Cameron is very much regarded as a smooth political operator. Many people see that as one of the reasons that under pressure, Rishi Sunak brought him back into the cabinet. But I think certainly we are seeing him under real pressure from the questioning from the MPs on this committee, cross-party MPs, but also from the chair, Alicia Kearns, who is a Conservative herself. And indeed, he also faced a real challenge repeatedly on the question of whether or not Israel had occupied Gaza. Again, this was something that he didn't really want to be drawn into, but eventually he did say, well, it is a de facto occupation of Gaza. And he said there are therefore issues around he was concerned about how much aid was getting into Gaza, and he had big questions for Israel about that as well. Also seemed a little bit not particularly sure-footed on the question of British hostages. He was clearly concerned about what he could and couldn't say about this, acknowledging that there are 2 hostages, British nationals, who are held by Hamas in Gaza, but couldn't comment, he said, on their status. He didn't know whether they were alive or not. And then also seemed to get into a bit of a muddle about how many others had already been released or not. Eventually, the Foreign Office, with Foreign Office assistance of the officials there, he kind of explained, well, actually, this is something that is under the control of the Israeli authorities, but more than 300 British nationals or their dependents in Gaza itself, not held hostage, have been helped home, and there are only a couple more there potentially still trying to get out who haven't been able to yet, but there are more there who don't want to leave at present. Also talked about his longer-term goals and the importance of working with allies to find a long-term peaceful solution for the area.